The Book of Entropy. On the first day there was regret. A woman woke to the organized suffering around her, the overheating planet with misery perpetuated through the generations like some disfigured birthright. Technology monetizing all, contorting perception at a fever pitch. Billions of individuals operating as though alone, feeling isolated, depressed. She observed this, the misery, the insanity of it. So, on the first day, she stated, "This is not good." And she went on a bender, plummeting herself into a stupor of debauchery, denial, avoidance, self-deception. There were several revolutions of the planet round the sun before she emerged from this altered haze. When she did shake herself free of this self-imposed cloud, it became the second day, and she considered her next steps carefully, understanding the far-sweeping ramifications of her coming actions. The Shiva, the benevolent, forgiving fool, the apathetic ostrich, the earth, this organic orb, held its figurative breath as though trembling on its axis. And, on this second day, she said, "Reboot." All the digital bits, widgets that ring, vibrate, speak, shine, compute, calculate, all fell into a blank screen amnesiac state. The analog hominid structures paused, peering glassy-eyed from screens to bright sky above, then across to the confused faces around. The one who is now acutely aware folded herself into a mountain cave for the night and fell into a fitful sleep. She was met by several non-human animals, who implored an answer with their intense wet eyes. She fancied in her dreams that the great hare was near tears. Early dawn light entered through the cave's mouth, and on this third day, sitting at the edge of this opening, looking out to the valley below, she proclaimed, "Show me what you got!" For the next 1,000 years, she sat at the entrance to her mountain hollow. Men, women, children made their way up the mount's craggy sides. Some mistook the proclamation as a demand for the material, carrying in their arms, on their backs, what they deemed most precious and valuable. To these she patiently shook her head and pointed to the back of the line. Some figured she intended for them to share skill, academic merit, artistic ability. These came before her with degrees, awards, creations, inventions. To these she pointed to the back of the line. Small children tended to bring a favorite toy or soft object. She let them gather within the cave. The space expanded to accommodate them. The children were permitted to play through the centuries with one another and with the animals that gradually joined them. From greedy CEOs, grifting politicians, corrupt military generals, and other human users, abusers, and enslavers, there was a common theme. Offers of money, stock option, objects of great material delight. To these, she directed towards a separate path to the side of her cave, at the end of which, a precipice. These predators could remain on the edge for the remainder of their time, or they could jump. This one who knows grew weary. Blood began to flow from her as the moon passed overhead. The clockwork pull of the night's mirror. She felt parts of her fall away in rivulets. "Let it pass," she said in a quiet voice. This was the fourth day, and on this day she proclaimed, "Let there be a cacophony." There was a great viscous flood from her root, a wetly articulated revolution, forcing her and all out from every tirade, shortcoming, accumulated pain, and lost potential in all those stifled human years. The torrent continued over the people in the valley. Some lost themselves, flowing out to the sea. Others held on to trees, boulders, long, strong blades of grass, as the flood continued to flash past them. Moaning, screaming, garbled shock. Just mere moments passed as this, that is all. The effusion left her calm and quiet in its wake. The moon set, and the sun rose. These sheared seconds elapsed, and the one who knows stretched, yawned, stood. She looked to the blazing sun. The heat of this central sphere increased in a pulsing exponential ultraviolet rhythm. It baked the people in the valley, drying them within her blood, cracking when they moved their joints. Their sweat and tears trail-blazed down cheeks. The remaining horde in the valley became still, stoic. They stood as statued martyrs in the powerful UV heat. She who understands was exhausted and empty. She crawled into the cave. The children and animals gathered around her curled, fetal shape. They nestled, radiating out in a cochlear spiral. The cave filled with the rhythmic inhalations and exhalations of all these slumbering bodies, in and out, in synchrony, creating in the valley at one moment a sucking, pooling vacuum. This followed by a great pushing air swell, again, again, again. The force of this air's molecular pulse began to desiccate, chip away at the encrusted layer of scab on the determined waiting bodies standing in the valley. Dried blood flakes were pulled away by this wind. These rest particles hovered, coalesced, aggregated above them in a great red-brown cloud, then into a dense orb of sternly organized iron. It floated up to eclipse the light of the sun. The valley darkened in this shrouded light, this bloody night, soothed and relaxed the people. They sank gently to the ground and slumbered sweetly to the cave's metronomic expiration and inspiration. Perhaps 1,000 years passed as such, in stasis, save for the moving air. Then she who was fully present awoke. The tidal wind ceased. The sun dissolved the red skin, and its full light illuminated all. She emerged from the cave mouth and settled herself back on her soft, moss-covered stone seat. On this, the 5th day, she proclaimed, "Let all who remain understand." The waiting people in the valley awoke, gasping in this sharp instant, as they all felt the empty gaps within their previous lives. The time wasted on fear, isolation, the cruelty, the regret, the selfish abuse of others and of the earth. They sobbed, choking, wrenching, convulsing grief, tears and moans and pounding of fists. Those who had lived most filled with such faults, drowned in their unending tears, lost as they were consumed by this visceral reckoning with their wrongs. The salt in these tears filled them within, mummifying their lungs then outward, until they fell as raisined humans. Those who remained in the valley felt the pain of memory subside, leaving them in a calm, a peace not a one of them had ever known. They looked up to the singular sitting on her stone perch. Children's laughter from behind her wafted down. It was the 6th day, and she who incites change stated quietly, "Forgive these." The moon rose from behind the sea. The sun succumbed to this suggestion and was chased towards the west. Night fell. The moon's face grew, encompassing over half the sky as the satellite moved closer and closer. The sea rallied in a series of grand tsunamis. And still the moon moved closer, until she who knows stood and reached a hand to the bright moon face and touched her with the whole of her palm and fingers. She who was the heart grew impossibly large in a fraction of a moment. She gently gathered the children and the animals from the cave in one hand, then collected the adults from the valley in the other. She placed her handfuls in a collection onto the barren lunar surface. All these living earth creatures were confused, airless in this vacuum, staring back at the giant, gentle face of the woman. She took in a deep breath, then blew it over them all. An atmosphere was formed, and the people and animals breathed deeply of this plentiful, sweet air. She who was at the center then grew larger even than the earth. Taking the moon in her hand, she threw it. The people watched as their planet, their sun, their system faded away in a rapidly growing distance. They did not comprehend, but calm persisted within. She who was now everything that was left, reduced her size and returned to her cave. This was the 7th day, and she whispered wearily, "Renew." The sun felt a tickle that expanded from the core, moving rapidly outward then snapping back in. With the force of all its potential made light and kinesis, in a blinding flash, it expanded to supernova. Its atomic heat moved out in all directions, scorching Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, and so on. She who was almost done broke into pieces smaller than an electron, as did all that had been known as Earth. Just as she who created the end disappeared from thought, she felt the presence of her final instant and emanated, "Let me return to nothing." And she did, and it was good.